Welcome to this section of the Rohai kata. As we normally do, we'll have a look at the history of the kata, find out a little bit more about it. The name Matsumura will appear again, but maybe not the one you're thinking of. And then we'll look at the key points. The first key point I'd like to have a look at is mai. Generally described as distance, but if you dig into it, there's a lot more to it than just distance. So we'll try and flesh that out a little bit, and we'll feed that back into a demonstration during the kata. The second key point is gamaku. These are Okinawan terms, and they don't directly translate into the Japanese equivalent. There's generally a little bit more to them. But gamaku generally relates to the centre of the body. The next key point is chinkachi. And again, chinkachi, there is a Japanese sort of equivalent, but as per usual, there's a little bit more to chinkachi than meets the eye. And the final one is mochimi, named after a sticky, heavy, dense rice cake, and it's a general feeling of heavy body that's used a lot in Okinawan style punching. And as this is a very Okinawan style kata, this is a good place to fit it into the series. So the history of Rohai. The name Matsumura appears again, but whereas previously in Shinto, Basai, Koshanku, it was Sokon Matsumura. This is another famous Okinawan master called Kosaku Matsumura. In my research, I haven't been able to find any information whether the two Matsumuras were related. It doesn't appear so, it's not mentioned. But they both were hugely influential and both taught Itosu and Choki Motobu. So a lot of the information we've been sharing coming from Motobu and Itosu came from two masters named Matsumura. And it was the second Matsumura who made sort of Rohai popular in Okinawa. The name sort of gives away its origin. It can mean the image or the picture of a crane, and that goes back to his southern Chinese white crane roots. And these one-legged positions like you get in Shinto or where we get in Rohai come from white crane. But the white crane isn't native to Okinawa. So in Okinawa, it's referred to the picture or the image of a heron, because the heron is native to Okinawa and they're very similar in appearance and characteristics. So if somebody's explaining the name, if they use a crane, then it's more Chinese. If it's a heron, it's more Okinawan. There are also three Rohais. Wado does Shodan, but there is also a Nidan and a Sandan. But Otsuka Sensei, the first, decided he didn't want to use the second and third one. And that's the same with Naihanshi. There are three Naihanshis, but Otsuka the first only decided to do Shodan. He said in Naihanshi, the second and third katas were almost useless. Now, whether he thought they were bad katas or whether he thought that the techniques in them were covered in the first one and other katas, I don't know. But he made the same decision with Rohai. And the version we do in Wado is almost identical to the Shitaru version of Shodan. So you can assume that he learnt that from Kenwa Mabuni, who created Shitaru. So again, another kata with a big history, interesting links back to southern China. And again, one of a series, but in Wado we only use one of them. So key point number one, mai. If you see it written down, it's M-A-A-I, so it's actually two words. The ma relates to, very loosely, distance, but it's also the time that's implied with those distances. The second part, the I, is the same as in Aikido, and it means to blend or to harmonise with. And once you start to blend and harmonise with your partner, it changes the nature of the techniques. So if we look at the first part, my, there's like the Goldilocks and the Three Bears, where the one porridge is too hot, the other's too cold, and the other's is just right. So if Simon's done a punch, this is too far away to be practically useful. This would be too close. This would be just right. So setting up the correct distance for a technique is part of my, and it's the one that's generally discussed the most. When you see beginners and they're learning and they start doing this because they haven't found this sweet spot where they can perform the blocking technique and make the punch. So that's like a good depth of understanding to be able to make gi contact but not hurt your opponent. What I never really understood about the partner work, how it's performed, until we started doing this video series. And it really encapsulates everything about my in what looks like a very formal setting. So we start here. This is a safe distance. Neither of us can reach each other without making some sort of pushing action. So from the start, it's teaching you about safe distancing. Once we start to look at distancing, kicking distance is obviously further away than punching distance. So punching distance, we have to come in close. If we're coming into grapple, we're closer still. So there are elements of distance, and your partner work, these are the things you need to be looking for. Because when you partner up, if I'm going to make the attack, there's no point me punching here, too far away. I have to be able to push in so my strike will land. That then gives my partner a chance to defend and find these Goldilocks just right distance. But it's also an implication, and it's not discussed so much, is time. If I'm going to do a kick and it's got to cover distance, it's going to take longer for that to reach than for that to reach, and certainly in close. So there is a time element. So when you're doing your partner work, you're running these sort of complicated calculations of what's the distance, what's the time involved. If it's a kicking attack, you've probably got more time than if it's a punching attack. So your mind, through the years of training with an opponent, allows you to do these calculations very quickly, and you can measure up different sizes of people and limb length and be able to perform your partner work accurately and quickly straight away. But the second part, the eye, the blending, this is a little bit more Wado specific, if you like. I'm led to believe that Asuka Sensei, he trained with Yoshiba, who created Aikido. And there's certainly sort of elements of that type of thing. So if Simon steps in with a right roundhouse punch, if we do it as a typical sort of karate style technique, we will block and then punch. Very linear. But if we think of it as eye and harmonising, as he comes in with his circular attack, we also make a circular defence. So rather than being linear to him, we're blending and harmonising with him. If he does a Junzuki Chudan, we can do classic karate, or we can blend and then harmonise with him. So if you think about it as the two different disciplines, distance, timing, the time interval for attacks, but then also think of it as eye, which is the harmonising and the blending, then you can very quickly start to understand some of the more subtle information that's been imparted in your partner work.